I woke up at 5:30 that Saturday morning, same as I had for 43 years, even though there was no job site waiting for me. Old habits die hard when you've spent your whole life building things with your hands. The May sunlight was already creeping through the bedroom curtains of my small house outside Dalton, Georgia, and I lay there staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about that text message for probably the 1,000th time since it arrived 3 weeks ago. I wish that hick dad of mine would just stay home and not embarrass me. My name is Douglas Ray Kimball, and those words, sent by mistake from my only child, had been eating at me like termites in good wood. I'm 67 years old, and I've survived a lot. Losing my parents young, a year in Vietnam that I don't talk about, burying my wife Veronica 8 years back from cancer that took her in 6 brutal months. But somehow this hurt worse than almost anything. Maybe because it came from Courtney, my baby girl, the one person I thought knew me, really knew me, understood what every callus on my hands represented. I got up and made coffee in the old percolator Veronica bought at a yard sale in 1989. The kitchen was quiet, except for that familiar bubbling sound. Through the window over the sink, I could see my workshop, the place where I'd built cradles and cabinets and hope chests for half the county, the place where I was standing sanding down a jewelry box I'd made for Courtney's graduation gift when that message came through and my hands went still for the first time in decades. I'd been so proud. Courtney was graduating from Emory University with a degree in marketing, first person in our family to finish college. I'd worked myself half to death to make sure she could go, taking every overtime shift at the construction company, doing side jobs on weekends, eating bologna sandwiches for dinner so I could send her extra money for books and sorority dues and all those things that seemed important to her. After Veronica passed, it was just the two of us in this house, and I poured everything into making sure Courtney had opportunities I never did. But somewhere along the way, maybe during her sophomore year, maybe earlier, she'd gotten ashamed of me. I drank my coffee black and stared at Veronica's picture on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like the state of Georgia. She was laughing in that photo, her arm around 12-year-old Courtney at some church picnic. "What would you do, Ronnie?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. She used to tell me to pray when things got hard, to talk to God like he was sitting right there at the table. So I tried. I asked for wisdom, for peace, for the strength to do what felt right, even though it was tearing me up inside, even though part of me wondered if I was being cruel instead of just... The dress Courtney had picked out cost $800. I remember choking on my coffee when she sent me the link. Some designer thing, white lace, the kind of dress I could have bought Veronica's wedding gown 3 times over for. The venue fee for her part of the graduation party was another $1,200. The photographer she wanted, some hotshot who'd done spreads for Atlanta magazine, was $600 more. I'd been paying for it all in installments, same way I'd paid for everything in my life, carefully, month by month, making sure the money was there, even if it meant I didn't fix the leak in my bathroom or put off replacing the truck's worn-out tires. But after that text, I'd called every vendor and canceled, stopped the payments, asked for refunds where I could get them. It wasn't about the money. Lord knows I had the money. I'd been saving for this day since the afternoon Veronica placed that squirming newborn in my arms and said, "Douglas, we made something perfect." It was about respect, about her understanding that the hick who embarrassed her was the same man who'd sat up with her through ear infections and nightmares, who'd learned to braid hair from YouTube videos because there was no mama to do it, who'd attended every parent-teacher conference alone while other kids had 2 parents, who'd eaten dinner by himself for 4 years while she was away at school, counting down the days until she came home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. I showered and put on my best clothes, a navy blue suit I'd bought for Veronica's funeral and had worn maybe 3 times since. It was a little loose on me now. I'd lost weight this past year, not eating right, working too much, drinking too much coffee, and not enough water. I polished my shoes, the black leather ones Courtney had given me for Father's Day 5 years ago, back when she still seemed happy to call me Dad, back when she'd hug me at the airport and didn't seem to care that I smelled like sawdust and Old Spice. The drive to Atlanta took about an hour and a half. I took Highway 75 south in my pickup truck, a 2008 Ford F-150 with 203,000 miles on it, but an engine I maintained myself, meticulously the way I maintained everything. The radio played old country, Merle Haggard, George Jones, the stuff Veronica loved, but I turned it off halfway there, couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting to memories I didn't want to examine too closely. Courtney, at 6 years old, showing me a drawing she'd made at school, a stick figure with big hands labeled, "My Daddy Builds Houses." Courtney at 13, sobbing in my arms the day we buried her mama, whispering, "Don't leave me too, Daddy." Courtney at 17, getting her acceptance letter from Emory, screaming with joy, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. When did that change? When did I become someone to hide? Atlanta traffic was thick, even on a Saturday. I navigated through it, past the gleaming skyscrapers and the gentrified neighborhoods that used to be something else before money remade them, until I found the hotel where the graduation ceremony and reception were being held. The Whitley, some five-star place in Buckhead with valet parking and doormen in uniforms that looked like they belonged in a movie about royalty. I parked my truck in the self-parking garage, 4 levels down, next to Mercedes and BMWs and Teslas that cost more than I'd made in 2 years of work. Walking toward the elevator, I caught my reflection in a car window. An old man with sun-weathered skin, white hair I'd combed carefully, a suit that was clean and pressed but clearly not expensive. I looked exactly like what I was, a working man trying to fit into a world that wasn't built for him. The hotel lobby took my breath away. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. I walked through it, and I could feel the glances. Nothing hostile, just noticed. The old man in the decent but obviously off-the-rack suit. The calloused hands that had built houses but had never signed a contract at a desk. The face that had spent too many years in the Georgia sun doing honest work. A young couple passed me, parents obviously, with their graduate daughter between them. The father wore a suit that probably cost $5,000 and had his arm around his daughter's shoulders. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking at him with pure adoration. My chest tightened. The graduation ceremony was in the hotel's grand ballroom. I found a seat in the back row, didn't want to draw attention. The room filled up fast, probably 300 people, maybe more. I watched families stream in, watched fathers and mothers and siblings all dressed in their finest, carrying flowers and balloons and cameras. I'd brought my old Canon, the one I'd used to photograph Courtney's entire childhood, but suddenly I felt foolish having it. Then I saw her walk in with her graduating class, all of them in caps and gowns, and my heart did what it always did when I saw her. Swelled up with pride and love and an ache so deep I could barely breathe, even now, even after everything. She looked so much like Veronica it hurt. Same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same way of holding herself like she was taller than she actually was, like she owned whatever room she walked into. She was sitting with her friends, girls in perfect makeup, boys with confident smiles, and she was laughing at something. Her whole face lit up, and she hadn't seen me yet. The ceremony started. Some dean gave a speech about excellence and future leaders. The valedictorian talked about challenges and opportunities. They called names, handed out diplomas, each graduate walking across that stage to applause. When they called Courtney Veronica Kimball, I stood up without thinking, started to clap, then caught myself and sat back down quick, embarrassed. A few people around me smiled, understanding. Proud parent, they probably thought, if they only knew what was coming. After the ceremony, everyone moved to an adjacent ballroom for the reception. This was the part Courtney had been planning for months, the part where graduates and their families would celebrate together, take professional photos, eat fancy catered food, make toasts. I'd heard all about it during our phone calls, back when she still called regularly, before her texts became shorter and less frequent, before I became an obligation instead of her dad. I hung back near the doorway, watching. There was a registration table where graduates were checking in, picking up their name cards for the reserved tables, getting their party favors and photo packages. I saw Courtney approach the table, still in her cap and gown, her face bright with excitement. She was with 3 of her friends, girls who'd been to our house once, maybe twice, who'd looked around our small living room with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Then I saw Courtney's face change. The woman at the registration table, middle-aged, professional-looking, wearing a name tag that read Kristen, was shaking her head, looking at a computer screen, then back at Courtney. I couldn't hear the conversation from where I stood, but I could read every emotion that crossed my daughter's face. Confusion, then concern, then something close to panic. She was gesturing now, talking faster, her voice rising enough that people nearby were starting to glance over. Kristen was showing her the screen, pointing at something, her expression sympathetic but firm. Courtney pulled out her phone, started scrolling frantically through what I assumed were emails or confirmations. "There must be some mistake," I could imagine her saying. "My father paid for everything." That's when another graduate approached. Tall boy, expensive haircut, wearing a suit that fit him like it was custom made, probably named Ryan or Brandon. He put his hand on Courtney's shoulder, asked if everything was okay. She shook her head, said something sharp, and he walked away looking uncomfortable, whispering to his parents who stood nearby holding champagne flutes. I watched Courtney step aside from the table, her face drained of color now, her hands actually shaking as she dialed a number on her phone. I knew whose number. Mine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked at the screen. Courtney Mobile. Above her name was a photo from 3 years ago, her smiling at the camera during a visit home, back when she still smiled at me like that. I didn't answer. I watched her from across that crowded ballroom as she waited, listened to it ring, then pulled the phone away from her ear when it went to voicemail. Her face crumpled for just a second before she composed herself. She immediately dialed again, her fingers fumbling on the screen. Again, I let it ring. She was crying now, trying desperately to hide it, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging the makeup she'd probably spent an hour applying. She walked quickly toward the bathroom, her gown swishing around her legs, her shoulders shaking. A couple of her friends, young women in expensive cocktail dresses, probably named Jessica and Nicole, called out to her, asking what was wrong, but she didn't stop, just pushed through the door into the ladies' room. I felt something twist in my chest, something that felt like a heart attack, but was probably just guilt and grief and love all tangled together. This was the moment I'd known was coming, the moment I'd planned for during 3 weeks of sleepless nights, and it hurt worse than I'd imagined it would, worse than the day Veronica died, worse than anything. A man about my age, maybe younger, hard to tell with men who've never done physical labor, whose hands have only held pens and golf clubs, approached the registration table. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my truck's down payment. I watched him talk to Kristen, watched her explain something while gesturing at her computer, watched his expression shift from curiosity to irritation to something darker. He looked around the room, clearly searching for someone, for whoever was responsible for this embarrassment to his graduate. Another father joined him, equally well-dressed, equally angry-looking, and they started talking in low, sharp tones. I knew I should leave, get in my truck, and drive home to Dalton. Let Courtney figure this out on her own. Let her learn the lesson about consequences and respect. But my feet wouldn't move, because despite everything, despite that text message burned into my memory, despite the shame she felt about me, she was still my daughter. Still the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides, who used to say I was the strongest man in the whole world, who used to kiss my cheek and say, "Love you, Daddy," without any embarrassment at all. Courtney emerged from the bathroom 10 minutes later. Her makeup was gone, washed away, leaving her face bare and blotchy. She'd taken off her cap and gown, was just wearing the dress underneath, a simple navy dress. Nothing special, not the expensive white designer gown she'd wanted, the one I hadn't paid for. She must have borrowed this one or bought something cheap at Target at the last minute when she realized. Her eyes were scanning the room, desperate, searching. And then she saw me. Our eyes met across that crowded ballroom full of celebrating families, and I watched recognition flood her face. Then understanding, slow and terrible and complete. Then something I couldn't quite read. Anger, maybe, or betrayal, or the devastating realization that her father had done this deliberately. She started walking toward me, her jaw set, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, and everyone between us seemed to disappear. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, it all faded into white noise. There was just my daughter, 22 years old, walking toward me with tears streaming down her face, and an expression that broke my heart into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. The confrontation between Douglas and Courtney, maximum escalation of the conflict. The emotional climax where Douglas must face what he's done, real consequences of his choice, Courtney's realization, transformation, Douglas's own reflection on his actions, a resolution that feels earned, not easy, Christian values subtly present, forgiveness, humility, grace, not vengeance. Must maintain first-person POV throughout American cultural setting. Names from the provided list used randomly. Realistic, dramatic, emotionally powerful. The confrontation should be raw and painful. Courtney will be angry, humiliated. Douglas will have to defend his choice, but also face the pain he's caused. There needs to be a turning point where both characters are forced to see each other clearly. Her seeing his sacrifice and pain, him seeing how his lesson may have been too harsh. Let me create names from the list for any additional characters. I've used Douglas, Courtney, Veronica, Kristen. If I need more, I'll pull from the list randomly, maybe Kyle, Brandon, Melissa, etc. The resolution should show growth on both sides, not a quick fix, but the beginning of healing. The Christian values should come through in Douglas's ultimate response, not gloating, not self-righteous, but broken and hoping for reconciliation. Grace, not revenge. Mostrar mais concluído. Text. 2. She stopped 3 feet away from me, close enough that I could see every detail of her face. The red-rimmed eyes, the trembling lip, the pulse hammering in her neck. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The ballroom noise swirled around us, but we stood in our own terrible silence. You did this. Her voice was low, shaking. Not a question, a statement. I nodded. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. I did. Why? The word came out strangled, desperate. Why would you? She couldn't finish. Her hands were trembling so badly she crossed her arms tight across her chest to hide it. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Pulled up that screenshot I'd saved 3 weeks ago. Turned the screen toward her without saying a word. I watched the blood drain from her face as she read her own words. I wish that hick dad of mine would just stay home and not embarrass me. Oh God, she whispered. Dad, I didn't mean for you to, but you meant it for someone else. My voice came out harder than I intended. You meant it for your roommate or your friends or whoever. You just didn't mean for me to see how ashamed you are of me. I'm not. She stopped herself, and I could see the lie die on her lips because we both knew the truth. It's complicated. Is it? I asked. Because it seems pretty simple to me, Courtney. I'm an embarrassment. I'm a hick. I'm someone you want to hide away so your fancy college friends don't have to know where you came from. People were starting to stare now. A couple nearby, parents of another graduate, moved away, uncomfortable with our confrontation. One of Courtney's friends, a girl who looked like her name might be Lauren or Lindsay, started to approach but then thought better of it. You don't understand what it's like, Courtney said, her voice rising. You don't understand what it's like to be here, with all these people whose parents are doctors and lawyers and executives, and my dad is a carpenter, I finished for her. A man who builds things with his hands. A man who raised you by himself after your mama died. A man who worked double shifts so you could go to this expensive school and become whatever you wanted to be. Tears were streaming down her face now. I know what you did for me, I know what you sacrificed, but do you have any idea how humiliating this is? Do you know what people are saying right now? That I couldn't even afford my own graduation party, that my family is poor, I said quietly. Is that the word you can't say? That your family is poor? She flinched like I'd slapped her. We're not poor, Courtney. We've never been poor. We've been working class. We've been paycheck to paycheck sometimes, sure. But I've always made sure you had what you needed. The difference is I've never been ashamed of it. I've never been ashamed of honest work, of earning my living with my own 2 hands. I held up those hands now, calloused and scarred, the hands that had built her childhood, and she looked away. You humiliated me, she said, her voice breaking, in front of everyone on the most important day of my life. You knew what would happen. You knew I'd come here expecting everything to be ready, and instead I look like someone whose father didn't pay for her party? I said. Yeah, I knew exactly what would happen, that was the point. How could you? She was sobbing now, not caring who saw. How could you be so cruel? That word, cruel, hit me like a hammer to the chest, because maybe she was right. Maybe what I'd done wasn't a lesson. Maybe it was just revenge dressed up as teaching her something. Maybe I'd let my hurt and my pride turn me into someone Veronica wouldn't recognize. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I'm sorry for the way I did this. I'm sorry for the embarrassment. I'm sorry for... I had to stop, had to clear my throat. I'm sorry for a lot of things, baby girl. But I'm not sorry for trying to teach you that actions have consequences, that the words we say matter, even the ones we don't mean for people to hear. So this was what, a lesson? She laughed bitterly. You destroyed my graduation day to teach me a lesson? I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly. I just stopped paying for it. There's a difference. No, there isn't, her voice cracked. You promised me. You promised you'd take care of everything, and I trusted you, and you used that against me. She was right. God help me, she was right. Before I could respond, a man approached us. One of the fathers I'd seen earlier, angry-looking, in his expensive suit. He was probably in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of tan you get from golf courses, not construction sites. "Excuse me," he said, his voice dripping with disdain as he looked at me. "Are you Douglas Kimball?" "I am." "I'm Richard Preston, father of Brandon Preston, one of the graduation committee members. We've been trying to reach you about the unpaid balances for your daughter's participation in today's event." Courtney made a small sound of mortification. "The balances aren't unpaid," I said calmly. "They're canceled. I contacted every vendor weeks ago." Richard's face reddened. "Do you have any idea what kind of disruption this has caused? Your daughter registered for services, committed to participation, and then you simply decided not to pay? Do you understand that other families had to scramble to cover the shortfall?" "Nobody had to cover anything," I said. "My daughter's non-participation shouldn't have affected anyone else's experience. The photographer's minimum was based on a certain number of participants," Richard said coldly. "The venue pricing was tiered. When you pulled out at the last minute, it affected the entire event." I hadn't thought of that, hadn't considered that my decision might ripple out beyond just Courtney. Shame heated my face. "I'm sorry for any inconvenience," I said stiffly. "That wasn't my intention." "Your intentions are irrelevant," Richard said. "What matters is—" "Mr. Preston." Courtney's voice was quiet but firm. "This is between me and my father. Please." Richard looked at her, seemed to recognize that he'd overstepped, and nodded curtly. "Fine, but the committee will be in touch about the complications this created." He walked away, and I could see him immediately joining another group of parents, no doubt spreading the story of the deadbeat dad who'd humiliated his daughter. Courtney and I stood there in the wreckage of her graduation day. "I need some air," she said finally. I need to get out of here." She started walking toward the exit, and after a moment's hesitation, I followed her. We made our way through the lobby, past the celebrating families, past the judgment and the whispers, until we were outside in the Atlanta afternoon heat. There was a small garden area beside the hotel, some landscaped space with benches and Bradford pear trees. Courtney sat down heavily on one of the benches, and I sat beside her, careful to leave space between us. For a long time, we just sat there. I could hear traffic from Peachtree Road, could hear laughter from inside the hotel, could hear my own heartbeat too loud in my ears. "Do you remember?" Courtney said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I was 8 and I wanted that American Girl doll so badly, the one all my friends had?" I remembered. Samantha, it was called. Cost over $100, which might as well have been $1,000 back then. "You told me we couldn't afford it," she continued. "That Christmas was coming and I needed to choose, the doll or other presents, and I chose the doll." "You did," I said softly. "And on Christmas morning, there was the doll under the tree. But there were also other presents, all the things I thought I'd have to give up, and later, when I was older, Mom told me you'd worked every single Saturday in December doing side jobs to earn the extra money, that you'd barely slept." My throat tightened. I'd forgotten Veronica had told her that. "I know what you've sacrificed for me, Dad," Courtney said, tears running down her cheeks again. "I know you've given me everything. I know I wouldn't be here, wouldn't have graduated from Emory, wouldn't have any of this without you." "Then why?" I asked, and my voice broke on the word. "Why are you ashamed of me?" She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was small, honest in a way that hurt worse than anger. "Because I'm ashamed of myself," she said. "Because I came to this school, and everyone around me had so much, and I had to work 3 part-time jobs just to have spending money. Because I couldn't go on spring break trips to Cancun. Because when people asked about my family, I didn't know how to explain that my mom was dead and my dad was—" She stopped. "I didn't know how to explain you in a way that made sense to them, and instead of being proud of where I came from, I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be like them. And the easiest way to do that was to hide you. The honesty of it gutted me, because I understood. God help me, I understood what it was like to want to belong, to want to be accepted, to be willing to pay almost any price for it. I became someone I don't recognize," she whispered. "Someone Mom would be ashamed of." "Your mama would never be ashamed of you," I said firmly. "She'd be disappointed maybe in some of your choices, but ashamed? Never. She loved you too much for that." "Do you?" Courtney turned to look at me, her face raw with vulnerability. Do you still love me after what I said, after how I've treated you? Oh, baby girl. I felt my own tears coming now, couldn't stop them. I never stopped, not for 1 second, even when I was angry, even when I was hurt, even when I was canceling those payments and hating myself for it. I never stopped loving you. You're my daughter. You're the best thing I ever built with these hands. I held them out again, and this time she looked at them, really looked. I'm so sorry, Daddy, she sobbed, and suddenly she was hugging me, her arms around my neck like when she was little, and I was holding her while she cried against my shoulder. I'm so sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for being ashamed. I'm sorry for not calling enough, for not visiting, for letting this place change me into someone I don't even like. I held her and let her cry, rubbed her back the way I used to when she had nightmares, and felt something in my chest that had been locked tight for 3 weeks finally start to ease. I'm sorry too, I said into her hair. I'm sorry for the way I handled this, for embarrassing you today, for... I pulled back so I could see her face. For letting my hurt pride matter more than your happiness. That wasn't fair. That wasn't who I want to be. I deserved it, she said. Maybe, but I could have found a better way to teach you. A way that didn't involve humiliating you in front of everyone you know. Your mama would have known a better way. She always did. Courtney wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving mascara streaks. What do we do now? I thought about it. Thought about Richard Preston and the committee and the disruption I'd caused. Thought about the dress Courtney wasn't wearing and the photos she wouldn't have and the party she'd miss. How much would it take, I asked slowly, to fix this, to pay for everything now, last minute? Dad, you don't have to. How much? She pulled out her phone, checked something. They said if I could pay the full amount by the end of today, they could still honor most of the arrangements. The dress is gone, but they have a backup photographer. The venue can add me back in. It would be, she swallowed, probably close to $4,000 with all the late fees and rush charges, $4,000. I had it. Had it saved in the account I'd been building for her future, for a down payment on a car or an apartment or whatever she needed after graduation. Will you come back inside with me? I asked. Let me fix this? You don't owe me anything, she said quietly. Not after how I've treated you. That's where you're wrong, baby girl. I owe you everything. You're my daughter. You're my second chance at doing something right in this world after your mama died. I stood up, held out my hand to her. Let me be your dad. Let me take care of you. Not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because that's what fathers do. That's what love does. She took my hand, let me pull her up. We stood there in that garden, and I could see her struggling with something, working up the courage to say something difficult. Would you? She stopped, started again. Would you stay for the rest of the reception? I know it's not your scene, and I know you probably want to just go home, but you want me to stay? I want everyone to meet you, she said, and her voice was stronger now, more certain. I want them to meet my dad, the man who raised me, the man who built half the houses in Whitfield County, the man who taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook and... Her voice cracked. And love somebody even when they don't deserve it. Something in my chest unlocked completely. I'd be honored. We walked back inside together, hand in hand, like when she was little. I paid the balance at the registration desk. Kristen's eyes widened when I pulled out my card, but she processed it professionally. $4,267. I didn't even flinch. The photographer, a young man named Kyle, maybe 30, with tattoos and expensive equipment, was able to fit Courtney in for family photos. We stood together in front of a backdrop with the Emory logo, and for the first time all day, Courtney smiled, really smiled. Can we get one with him in his work clothes? Courtney asked Kyle suddenly. What? I said. Your work clothes, the ones in your truck, the boots and the jeans and the flannel shirt. Can we do one photo like that? Courtney, I don't think... Please, Dad. I want one real picture. One that shows who you really are. So I went to my truck, changed in the parking garage into my work clothes, the ones I'd brought just in case, the worn jeans and the flannel shirt and the boots with red Georgia clay still on them. When I walked back into that fancy ballroom dressed like myself, truly myself, I could feel the stares. But Courtney was waiting for me, beaming. We took the photo, Me in my work clothes, her in her borrowed navy dress, both of us with our arms around each other, both of us smiling like we meant it. Later, after I'd changed back into my suit, Courtney introduced me to her friends. Jessica and Megan and Brandon and Kyle. The names I'd imagined turned out to be almost right. Some of them looked uncomfortable, some of them looked curious, but Courtney didn't apologize for me. Didn't explain, just said, "This is my dad, Douglas," with her chin up and her voice proud. We stayed until the reception ended. I drank punch and made small talk and even spoke briefly with Richard Preston, who apologized stiffly for his earlier rudeness. I told him I understood that I'd put him in a difficult position, and we shook hands like men do when they're both trying to do better. As the evening wound down and families started leaving, Courtney and I stood by the hotel entrance. "Come home with me tonight," I said. "Stay at the house. We can have breakfast tomorrow the way we used to. I'll make my pancakes. The ones with chocolate chips. Is there any other kind?" She laughed, and it sounded like music. "Okay, yeah, I'd like that." We drove back to Dalton in separate cars, her in the Honda I'd helped her buy 2 years ago, me in my truck. The sun was setting over the Georgia hills, painting everything gold and red, and I thought about Veronica, about how she would have handled this whole situation with more grace than I'd managed. But I also thought that maybe she'd be proud of us anyway, proud that we'd found our way back to each other. That night, Courtney slept in her old room, in the bed I'd built for her when she was 12. The next morning, I made pancakes with chocolate chips, and we sat at the kitchen table and talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. About her job prospects, about my arthritis, about whether I should finally fix that leak in the bathroom, about her mama and how much we both missed her and how we were doing our best without her. Before she left to drive back to her apartment in Atlanta, Courtney hugged me at the door. "I love you, Daddy," she said, "and I'm proud to be your daughter. I'm proud of where I come from." "I love you too, baby girl," I said, "and I'm sorry I had to teach you the hard way." "I needed it," she said simply. "I needed to see what I was becoming, what I was losing." I watched her drive away, her hand waving out the window, until she turned the corner and disappeared. Then I went to my workshop and picked up that jewelry box I'd been making, the one I'd stopped working on when that text message came through. I finished it that afternoon, sanded it smooth, applied the final coat of varnish, lined it with velvet. Inside the lid, I carved her initials, CVK, Courtney Veronica Kimball. A week later, I mailed it to her with a note. "For storing treasures, love, your hick dad." She called me that night, laughing and crying at the same time, and told me it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever owned. And maybe we weren't fixed completely. Maybe there was still work to do, conversations to have, forgiveness to practice on both sides. But we were moving in the right direction, together, the way families do when they remember what really matters, the way Veronica would have wanted.